It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex and all of its multi-million dollar deal making. How you doing today, Steve?
I am doing just fine. How about you, man? How's everything?
Normal, spring is starting to at least peer around the corner.
We went about like a month down here without me being able to play any golf. And that was distressing to me. Now, I'm not a good golfer, but I enjoy golf. It's one of those things. I have a love-hate relationship with it, because it's a lot of me traipsing through the rough, when I'm playing golf. But it was fun to play, at least last week for the first time in several weeks. So I realize you guys up north, it's not golf season. But down here in Texas, it's supposed to be golf season. And we had 3 weeks of rain, and it really bugged me.
Well, two things to build off that. One, how do you reconcile your legendary cheapness with such an expensive hobby?
Well, it's because I value family over money. And so I have one of my sons wants to play a lot of golf. And so I do a lot of it with him.
Okay.
That's why.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm sure
I'll cheat the course every time I can get, don't get me wrong.
But I mean, even like the equipment, like the people that
okay. But I've had the same clubs for like 15 years.
I was going to say, I'm sure we can find the paths to frugality here.
Because he has asked for new clubs for Christmas, and Christmas maybe last year, and then he's already traded them in again, and
and there's the gloves and the special balls.
Well, and it's like, for me, it's like whatever golf ball doesn't have a bunch of cuts in it, it's fine. In the same clubs have been used, so I value my cheapness for sure, but I'm willing to spend the money for green fees and stuff for family reasons.
Do you have a good municipal course there?
This is going to sound awful. Yeah, no, but we have a private course that is very near my neighborhood that I talked them into waiving the initiation fee. And so the public course we have near us, or the private course we have near us, is very expensive. And so I realized if we play like 3 times a month, it actually saves money to pay a monthly fee to this inexpensive private course. So we're actually in a private course, which sounds hoity-toity, but it's as low level hoity-toity as you could possibly get, because I am too cheap to pay more than that. But I'm willing to pay a little bit because this family golf thing.
So no pool at this golf course?
No. There's no pool. There's no anything. It's just a golf course. That's it. It's not a resort and it's not anything.
Not Caddyshack.
No, there's a little tiny clubhouse with the store and a bar, and that's it.
Actually, I have 2 more things. This is because I have a couple of fascinating things. My brother-in-law was telling me, because this happened to his club in Maryland, that there's basically now a golf club conglomerate that goes and buys up these local golf clubs and then brings them into a network. And then, there's basically an affiliate model.
Well, that is what this one is. However, because I'm cheap, I don't pay a high enough monthly fee to have access to anything but the course that is right by my house. So
you couldn't go to their co-owned one in San Antonio or something?
I could not. No. Well, I could as a guest, but right. I mean, not as a member.
You don't get access from your membership.
No, I'm not. No. And like they lock us, like I can't play Saturdays. They lock us out. We're like the redheaded stepchildren of this.
Right. You have gray at times. Okay. Yeah. And then up near my, literally 2 miles from my place in the Catskills, the 2 huge investors just came in to revive this moribund, probably classic 60s era Catskills golf course. And the 2 prime investors, which totally blew my mind, are Jason Kelsey and Bill Murray.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, totally. Because I know like the local like business restaurateur group that they're partnering with, like, because they're kind of like, they own a bunch of stuff up there, and they just kind of redone their clubhouse restaurant, which is just like a decent Italian restaurant. So we've gone there, and they're like, oh, you can kind of see them puttering. Oh, they're gonna rehab the golf course. That's cool. And then we saw like then we saw like this highly produced video announcing Bill Murray and Jason Kelsey coming in as investors.
Mr. Caddyshack himself.
I know.
And then
so
Jason
wild.
Kelsey, of all like random people.
Yeah,
Jason Kelsey.
Kind of like zombie golf course in the Western Catskills.
See that something like that, not with strange, pairings like that, but my course was just a little public course, and somebody bought it and rehabbed it. That is what this conglomerate you're talking about bought it and rehabbed it. And
well, there's only so much land. Yeah, if you can.
Yeah,
golf courses are land intensive.
Well, and golf courses actually are not typically the highest and best use of land as met economically either. And so they do make a lot more sense under private control if you can, get enough members. And so for a club like this is that on the lower end of private, you throw it into a conglomerate and it makes a little bit more sense financially. See, there's a business component to this, kids.
There you go. So golf season has begun for Steve in Texas. I'm not a golfer, but we got a couple months here.
Yeah, I think we played once in January, and that was it. And then February a couple times. But it's been rough without the golf. If only I could be a better golfer. This would make it more fun.
Well, has more time for golf and more cash in the barrelhead for membership fees. Steve,
who's that? Why don't you tell me?
That's Stephen A. Smith, who just signed a new, what I believe, 5-year, $100 million deal to continue his role at ESPN. But if you just scratch a little bit, which means reading past the second or third paragraph of the article, you find out that the new contract, which is eye-popping and huge and headline-worthy, but he's actually doing less work for this contract, not more.
Can someone explain this to me? What this is great work if you can get it, I guess. This is exactly right. It's 5 years, 100 million. And he's not going to do normal standard NBA pregame. He's actually going to do this expressly negotiated to allow him to do less ESPN work, which will free up time for him to do other politics stuff. Because like Stephen A. has been getting into, if anybody's seen this, into political stuff recently, and doing a bunch of other things. ESPN is willing to, I think they're so desperate. This is where it comes from, I think. ESPN has lost a lot of clout and a lot of credibility, I think, recently in the eyes of many people. And they've had some very public blow-ups, like 3 or 4 years ago, like the Mike and Mike show blew up in spectacular fashion, and they replaced a bunch of things. Stephen A. is the one guy who's sort of kept his reputation intact. And he's by far the biggest name on ESPN. A lot of those ESPN personalities have made jerks of themselves, and they've gotten kind of thrown to the sidelines. Somehow Stephen A. has said all kinds of crazy things, but has not only maintained his reputation, but has actually expanded it. And so this contract is in fact paying him more to do less, and it's because I think ESPN is so desperate to keep their biggest name on the books that they're willing to do almost anything.
I just think that, I probably don't disagree. I also think they just probably made a very, dollars and cents calculated decision that it makes the most sense for them to pay their very few. And, maybe this is, at this point, 3 or less. And Stephen A. at the top of the food chain, pay a lot of money to the very top of your on-air talent. And then you basically don't pay a lot for the long tail of broadcasters throughout the rest of the network, and you pay for the broadcast rights, and that's their business strategy, and just keep costs low on lots of other fronts and spend big on those two big ticket items.
Well, yeah, because who else is a huge name at ESPN anymore? Adam Schefter, probably.
I bet you if you were just looking at salaries, I bet you he'd be in the top 3 to 5 for sure. And the one that probably is the most valuable. They even have that one commercial that it basically says this, which ESPN's always been good at making fun of themselves on commercials, but it's that one about how they all need to pick a name, and it's like Mad Dog, and it's Chris Russo, who probably is also now in the top 3 or 4 of their stars at this point. My boy Mad Dog. And so they're all arguing about what their catch line should be. And have you seen this commercial? And
No,
and
because
then
I almost never watch ESPN except for football games.
And then Stephen A. he drives his cab, his cab slogan, where it basically rubs it. They look at the B talent. The B talent is kind of arguing about what they need to do to raise their profile, and then Stephen A.'s like cab ad will drives past their view. So basically the whole point of the commercial is there's only really one.
They're making fun of themselves.
Yes, definitely. Yes. 100%.
If you really think about it, like who are the big stars at ESPN beyond Schefter and Stephen A. Smith? I'd argue the guy who does the late night Sports Center.
He's the number 2.
What is his name?
What is
escaping me?
Scott. I can't believe his name.
See, I mean, now it's.
But that's not fair to him because he's actually revived Sports Center.
Now we're gonna have to look this up here because it's bugging both of Sports Center anchor. Okay, let's see here. Scott Van Pelt.
Yeah, sorry. I can't believe I can't think.
Yeah. So I would argue that Scott Van Pelt, Stephen A. Smith, and Adam Schefter in some order, probably Smith at the top, are the biggest stars by far, and everybody else is a bunch of second-rate no names, more or less.
Well, it's and there's lots of quality reporters there. So I
don't mean the talent. I just mean profile.
Yeah, but that's what they did. But they brought that. What they've done is drastically reduce the middle class pay there,
because we've seen a lot of people get fired,
right?
From ESPN.
Go younger, right?
And this is sort of ties into other things we talked about with ESPN for years, which is they're paying a fortune for broadcast rights for different sports. They just, matter of fact, the last show we did the breakup of Major League Baseball and ESPN, just last week, and they were throwing nasty things back and forth, remember? Then if I recall, ESPN said something along the lines of, we don't want to pay for a, fading sport or something, not use those words, but something along those lines. But Stephen A. is high profile and says crazy things and people love him. And so here you go. It's an interesting strategy. It's, like you said, cut the middle to save the top, because the top's the highest profile and could keep him in the news.
And it's the cheapest to produce. You just put him in front of a microphone and he goes on for hours, right? Like,
the guy can talk about anything.
Right. Oh, I'd probably say Kornheiser and Wilbon. I mean, that show's been on the air. It's a lock in the afternoon.
But
if we're looking at the top, if you're starting to rank the top 10, they're somewhere 6, 7.
Certainly, but they're way lower profile. I mean, yes, they're long time. They've been at ESPN forever. They've done that show.
It's in a key time slot, though. That means that it's important.
I've never watched 1 second of it ever, but so I'm probably the wrong person. But
I used to love the show, but that was also 20 years ago. It's been on that long.
Yeah, and I think they're much lower national profile.
I'm not sure about that. I think you're wrong there. You walk through an airport at 5:00 and they're on every TV screen.
Okay,
I was just in one.
We may disagree on that one, but certainly they're in there somewhere for sure.
But they're also the same model. You pay them a lot of money,
yes.
Maybe relative, right? I'm not saying they're getting Stephen A. money, but you're paying them top dollar. All you do is you throw them on and very low production costs, and that just eats up time.
And I think you probably have to throw Mike Greenberg into the top 10.
Yeah, right. I would say, yeah. But you can see their strategy.
Yeah.
Key people at high price points throughout the day, low production costs. And
if you notice, Greenberg, they have to put him with other folks, and it's a higher level of production because he's not as verbose, I would say, as like Stephen.
They overbet on him. Mike Golick actually just recently, like in the last 4 or 5 months, I mean, he basically said with enough time under the between it, he had nothing nice to say and said it was, kind of really talked about how the interpersonal, I'm not even talking about business, but the interpersonal fallout between the two of them when ESPN basically picked Greenberg over Golick.
Well, yeah. And if you kind of read between the lines of the end of that show, it was clear that Greenberg kind of dissed Golick, in the way the show was the original Mike and Mike show was ended. Golick kind of got kicked to the side. a little bit, and it never seemed like, for all their good banter on the show, it never seemed like they were friends, really, because they talked about it, we never see each other except we do this show. I would love to. Somebody needs to do a profile of the end of that show. It'd be a fascinating like sports story to read, I think.
Well, I wouldn't count on him being on 38 for 30 anytime soon.
No. It would have to be someone else.
Another network.
Yeah. But I do think, but it does seem like there was a lot of acrimony between those two as a result.
Oh, he says it. The last interview I read with him, it's not implied, it's overt.
Oh, okay. Because they put Greenberg on TV and they just basically
put him out to pasture. And fired his son eventually too. So it was a double whammy.
And I used to listen to Mike and Mike, and I listened to the following with Golick, and it was a couple different people, and the son was decent. It was still an entertaining show, but he's old, and that was it. So Greenberg is like the mini Stephen A. sort of, to a certain extent.
Speaking of how ESPN's break up with baseball, but maybe a way where they look pretty shrewd.
But wait, before you move on, the one thing that I thought was about this. Apparently, there have been rumors that Stephen A. is going to run for president in 2028. And this story, by the way, so the story we read, was in Bleacher Report. It was report Stephen A. Smith, ESPN agreed a new 5-year contract worth at least $100 million by Timothy Rapp in March 6, 2025. But it mentions in here, it cites a tweet from the Tonight Show in which Stephen A. addresses rumors that he's running for president. And so I can't believe that's serious, but if it is serious, this is a way for him to get a higher profile by giving him more time to go do more things. So I just want to throw that there. Sorry about that.
What that I've heard that rumor's been actually out there for a while. And the article explicitly says basically some of that, newfound funded free time would be so that he can go do talking head shows in the political world. So basically freeing him up to do drive time between 4 and 8 on the cable news shows. By all accounts, would run as a Republican, Steve.
He's been on both sides of issues. He's not
for the last couple of years. I think he registered. By all accounts, he would run as a Republican. I would have thought of him as a moderate independent, probably because he has views on sort of both sides of the political aisle and things. He's fairly down the middle. I don't know if I'd vote for him. I'd have to see, but I don't think he's a partisan hack on one side or the other. I'll give him that much credit for it. Let's move on to some big news, both I think nationally, but especially regionally, for, our tangential connection to the DC sports market. The Nationals and Orioles finally got the divorce that the Nationals needed on multiple fronts. I mean, this is one of those 1-year marriage, 20 years to settle the divorce type situation. But basically, when Montreal, it was
a marriage where the wife got knocked up and they
until the kid's 18. So basically, when the Montreal Expos moved to DC, Peter Angelos was so freaked out and so upset and fought it for so long that the key thing that they had to buy him off was basically the media rights control and having like a thumb on the scale of broadcast rights for the Nationals. Thus, we had the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network, MASN, the regional sports network that really made the Nationals a second-class citizen. So much so that Orioles have had to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in back damages and lost revenue, blah, blah, blah. But they finally got the divorce they needed. They are no longer at all connected, which leaves the Washington Nationals as free agents for their own media rights and have complete autonomy about their media rights, and also opens up a bunch of possibilities from there.
Okay, so we're reading an ESPN story. Nationals Orioles settle lengthy dispute over MASN TV rights. That the Associated Press is cited as the author, so it's obviously an AP article that ESPN's repurposing here, but dated March 3rd. But I will say, first of all, that the column says that MASN will continue to broadcast
for this upcoming season
through 2025, and so freedom comes after the 2025 season, technically speaking. I think that This is always, and I'm no Nationals fan. I'm a Dodgers fan. Okay. Everybody knows this, but I think it's been a very interesting and telling situation because, as you said, the only way that Peter Angelos allowed the Nationals into his market was if he could be on top of the media rights. And so for years, the Nationals had to pay over media rights money to the Orioles. They sued him. Now they're, Orioles have been had to pay him back. It's been absolutely atrocious. But the net effect of it is that with Major League Baseball's salary structure, the Nationals have not nearly had the capital that some of the other big market teams have had, which which affects the competitive balance of the game. We're going to get into some of that later. What this will do for the Nationals, for you Nationals fans, is allow them to have more money available to, if they want, if the owner is willing to do it, to buy players that they haven't had before because they're going to have a dramatically larger amount of media rights money coming in. So that is why this is important. It's not really so much important for you guys who want to see the games. They'll still be broadcast somewhere, but it's important for the team to have capital for salary purposes.
Yeah, it's massively important. I mean, just look at, I mean, the Nationals have won a World Series in the last 5 years. I think of any sports team, COVID just knocked the wind out of them because they lost their entire victory World Series champion season. That was just a huge financial blow to that team. But so they've been good. They've had amazing young players. Their farm system is incredible. But if you think whether it's Harper, whether it's Soto, they don't ever have enough to keep them. They actually have a very good young team now because one thing that they have their general manager is the best general manager in DC sports over the last 25, 30 years. The guy's
well, except for Vinny Serrato.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Vinny. But he's been amazing doing more with less. And so he will repack the farm system, level up superstars, and not even be able to keep one of them. So
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So they can't ever invest in themselves right now. If they were even just going to get a couple free agents, they'd be pretty competitive, but they haven't even been able to do that. So this totally opens that up. But the other thing it opens up, we also have to talk about the owners. One of the reasons this has been able to be amenable on the Orioles side is because the Angelos is no longer own the team. And so the new owners just had to they have as much interest in getting out of this yoke anyway.
Well, they won't want a bunch of controversy either.
No, and they're getting sued constantly. In fact, right. One of the things that this does is all lawsuits now are dropped. So it does take, because there were still pending lawsuits about back pay and, the past contracts and blah, blah, blah. So it gets the new owners and the Orioles out of this. This was not a fight that they picked. DC and Baltimore are radically different markets. It was always a fallacy. So, if they can support two NFL teams, blah, blah, blah. So now everyone's got, I think this is as good for the Orioles new ownership as anything. But the big question now is the Lerners had it up for sale. They hadn't gotten their price that they wanted. And everybody cited that the big anchor on their sale price was, and they were looking for $2 billion, was this issue. Without their control of their media rights, it was a extremely distressed asset. So now, does this mean the Lerners turn around and sell? And who would become the number one potential buyer,
well, the
probable
obvious
buyer, is Ted Leonsis, who then adds that to it. He controls everything but Commanders at that point in DC sports.
Which in NFL teams don't have local control of their media rights. So that isn't even a function he could even negotiate for. That I think that analysis is spot on. I think I agree totally. I just like to do some of the little backstory. It's listed some in here for those of you who don't understand what happened here. So read the story, but to summarize, MASN is 2005. The reason why it was financially imbalanced is that the Orioles had a 90% interest in MASN. Okay. And Washington had 10%. And so the idea was that the Nationals' equity was going to increase 1% per year, but cap out at 33%. So if this had continued, it was always going to be 67%, 33% forever, which is a massive disparity. And then it says network rights payments to each team were $20 million apiece in 2005 and 6. It went up by $1 million a year, but it was 2/3, 1/3 of the income from media rights were going to the Orioles. And yes, there were lawsuits up the wazoo about this constantly for years, most of which the Nationals won in terms of finances, but they could never get out of it. So what this is all about is this is a settlement. This is a master settlement of everything. And I think you sort of hit the nail on the head, which is the new Orioles owners, they want nothing to do with this. It's a drag on their business. It's a drag on it. It takes a ton of resource for them to have to think about lawsuits. They want to just do it and move on and be done with it. Let the Nationals do whatever they're going to do. Because I think you alluded to this as well. Yes, those two cities are very close, but it is a radically different market. Really is, and I think we've seen that Baltimore can support professional sports and DC can support professional sports on their own. They don't need to mix and match. The Ravens have their fan base, which is mostly Maryland. DC has their fan base, parts of Maryland, but mostly Virginia, DC, South. And I think the Nationals and the Orioles can coexist peacefully and all as well. And so I think everybody probably did the right thing here. And I think it sets up the Nationals to actually graduate from the bottom of the barrel in terms of finances into being able to compete with at least some of the bigger teams. They won't truly be able to compete with, because baseball has such a disparity, but they'll be in the upper third, maybe, probably if they get a good enough deal, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about what those might be, but like let Mike Rizzo cook. This guy's the best general manager in baseball, with no resources, with
I don't know about that, but okay.
Two arms tied behind his back.
He's a good one. I wouldn't call him the best, but okay.
Well, he has a handicap. Let Mike Rizzo cook. But what happens next is really interesting because there's a couple of emerging things. One, we've known that, we know these regional sport networks are crumbling, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. So we talked about that. That's a known, the cord cutting, everything, right? So they're either crumbling, they're going away. This means that I think the Orioles probably kill MASN at some point in the next couple of years and reinvent something else or go with where the trends are going. I think MASN probably doesn't exist or is going to be in serious trouble. But what do the Nationals do here? So there's basically a couple of emerging categories. One, the Ted Leonsis path, which would then make Monumental Sports. They would basically give them local DC sports programming the entire calendar year, because you add that many baseball games plus NHL plus NBA plus
everything that they could grasp. They can't have the NFL.
They'll have stuff on sports on TV every night. So that makes Monumental actually a fairly strong, very hyper regional sports network. But then we also have been reading for years that Major League Baseball, which has had to jump in and save some of the broadcasts rights in some of these places where the RSNs have gone belly up, is looking at doing some sort of direct-to-consumer thing and basically just centralizing baseball rights for X amount of teams. So that's a possible path. But then also this article, maybe it was the article on MS, I can't remember which one, but they're talking about how ESPN now might buy up some of these licenses because they want to package this with their flagship over-the-top streaming service. So now you can imagine ESPN buying these distressed assets, these media rights, coming in with probably pretty big checks, and then making those cornerstone to their subscription model, which means that they can start selling, hey, pay for ESPN, what's it called, flagship or whatever, pay for ESPN flagship, and then add the Brewers season pass onto your flagship. So you can see, so there's a couple of places where this might land, but those to me are the three lanes.
Okay, so what Chris is talking about was in Front Office Sports, this memo that Chris and I keep talking about. I assume this story is probably also
it's all on the website too,
right?
Yeah.
ESPN's baseball backdoor could be a local rights deal. So if you go back just 2 weeks ago, what we talked about was, which I mentioned before, the ugly divorce between ESPN and Major League Baseball. They basically accuse each other of declining influence and declining, fan base and everything. Major League Baseball said ugly things about ESPN. ESPN said ugly things about baseball. And what that lost them essentially was ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball. Well, as we all know, ESPN has been talking for 2 years now about establishing a major centralized hub of all things sports, through Disney, this flagship is called Flagship. So the back door between having a national Major League Baseball contract is what this story is talking about, is that ESPN now is talking about buying up the rights to through all these regional, through more than one regional sports network. They mentioned one in particular here, which I'm trying to find the name of. Um, Main Street Sports. Main Street Sports has got a number of these teams, and they could add, for example, they could add the Nationals, could add some more, and that gets them probably more than, as much or more than a deal with Major League Baseball. It just cuts down, it maybe cuts down on the production value a little bit because you have a bunch of local,
Yeah, you're sharing resources there on the broadcast.
right. Yeah, but I think given the circumstances, ESPN would rather have the content than a bunch of expensive, high value production value anyway.
Or one game a week. This would potentially, because we
This
all
is
know where this is
way
going.
more than one game a week.
Right. Yes, I'm saying. So they're gonna. So if they pull this off, it'll be pretty shrewd. So they get out. They take their opt out, and they end up paying far less for more games. And most people in just a couple years' time are going to be dealing with ESPN over their app, when Flagship launches. So in the end, ESPN gets more games for less money is the end result.
That's exactly right. And the story, by the way, apparently it was the Wall Street Journal that first reported this. And that the substance of the front office sports story is the Main Street Sports ESPN deal here. We're kind of talking about bigger issues, but just to be clear, and Main Street Sports has got rights to 9 clubs, 9 Major League Baseball clubs. And they apparently just got the Cincinnati Reds back. And so that's 9. And so that's 9 teams, means there's going to be a game on every single night. Between one of those, probably more than one, there'll be like, what, 5, 6, 7 of those teams will have games every single night. And then you add a couple other little, you add Monumental on there. You add a couple little other local ones, and pretty soon ESPN would have rights to they could easily have rights to most of Major League Baseball without really trying that hard.
Right. With the ability to a la carte sell you the level ups for your team and all kinds of stuff.
Yes, which is what everybody wants anyway. I mean, part of the problem that people always complain about these, for example, the NFL package, it's so expensive, they will not let you a la carte the teams. Why? Because they don't have to. The market doesn't dictate it. Remember, we talked about a lawsuit a while ago, a few months ago, but a guy who sued the NFL because he just wanted to watch the Saints. That was it. And the NFL refused and ended up in court. And to be honest, I can't remember what was the result of that story. But point is, in this circumstance, ESPN could have tiers. You could do the National League tier, the AL East tier, whatever the situation warrants here, if they have enough of these on ESPN. And also, this also helps regional sports networks. They basically become the middleman.
Yeah.
To this.
And a get out of jail free card for some of the owners because they get the payday and can leave the industry altogether, like get out from, under some of these contracts.
Yeah, right. Because, without some rights deals like this, what we've been talking about for a long time, the regional sports networks are in a massive amount of trouble. Some of them are headed towards bankruptcy and all of that, as we've discussed. And so this is a way for them to get out from under it and basically allow them to continue to exist and be like the cheap, low cost provider. It's sort of like if, like, an example is supermarkets a lot of times will brand products with their own, like HEB. Is that a national chain? HEB?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's a Texas thing, but like Kroger is a national brand. Kroger has Kroger branded materials. All they're doing is they're buying stuff from existing manufacturers and throwing their name on it. That's exactly what ESPN. This is an analogy what ESPN would be doing here. They'd be buying a local small rights deal from Main Street Sports and throwing ESPN's name on it for a much cheaper.
Yeah.
It's so much smarter. They definitely did the right thing to dump that Sunday Night Baseball thing was one of the more inefficient sports media contracts there was.
So let's before we got another regional sports network meltdown story here that we'll go to in just a second. But what so if you had to pick, Nationals go with Major League Baseball, they go with Ted Leonsis, or they somehow look to get part of a regional sports package that then gets purchased by ESPN, or I guess something that we haven't conceived of. What would you predict?
I would predict Leonsis gets him.
Yeah, I think it'll look like this. As we just mentioned a few minutes ago, they're on TV for 2025, so there's no MASN interruption in watching the Nationals. But they're going to already be shopping, right? They're shopping right now.
Absolutely.
So I think what happens is they invite Ted Leonsis in, turn over the TV, which the media deal with Monumental is the key part, and that Ted Leonsis comes in somewhere in the 20 or 30% stake, and then there's a plan over the next 5 years to transfer him to majority ownership. And I think it'll look like that.
And then Leonsis owns all of DC sports except for NFL.
Literally, even the small leagues. I mean, he literally.
I know. That's what I mean.
I mean, even the esports leagues or whatever. I mean, the total long tail, everything but the Commanders.
Yeah. And so I think it's inevitable to me that Leonsis will figure out how to get them on Monumental.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
And then who knows, 4 or 5 years down the road, he packages that whole thing with some kind of licensing deal or sale.
Well, at some point, these guys all get too old.
Yeah.
And they don't want to deal with it anymore, and they want to cash out, and either their family doesn't want to continue it, or they don't trust their families to continue it properly, and they just sell out. This is not sports, but like, for example, like we've seen this in music recently. Kiss and Queen both sold all of their rights to independent companies.
Oh, it's happening all the time. Yeah. They're publishing
it.
Yeah.
Dylan did it. Like, Kiss didn't just sell their publishing. Kiss sold all of the trademarks, everything. And the reason is these guys are, they get too old and they're done, and they just want to cash out and retire, basically, or do other things. And that at some point will happen to Leonsis too. I don't know how old he is, but I mean, at some point he's going to get tired of it and sell.
Yeah.
They all do.
Did you see that the sons of Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are recording together?
Yeah. Talk about bad ideas. I mean, look, I'm a Kiss fan. The odds that those two have the same talent as their respective parents, fathers, I think are slim. How often have we seen it?
What they do have
money
is generational wealth, so that they can do whatever they want.
Right. So they can afford to just go toil in obscurity for a while because they're not worried about eating.
Yeah, they can play rock fantasy camp for the rest of their lives if they want.
Exactly right. Because there's been a number of them, like Jacob Dylan, if you remember him.
Yeah.
He had a couple hits, here and there, and there's been
they still tour.
Yeah, but at a really low level though. They're not. The Wallflowers is not something that would have made Jacob Dylan, supporting himself for a lifetime of happiness.
No, probably not.
Having his father's money. And there's been some others like that. But what I'm saying is, I can't think of one that truly made it to the same superstar level as the parents. That's what I'm saying.
No, even if you brainstormed candidates, they'd be multiple levels below the success of the parent.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Eddie Van Halen's son, Wolfgang Van Halen, great rock band, way less than Van Halen. Just, as an example. Yeah.
If you look at someone like Julian Lennon, who had a, somewhat respectable 2 or 3 record run
for 5 minutes.
Right. That's obviously not even near the same thing.
Right.
All right. So the next RSN meltdown story is one where, you want to see bad people get their comeuppance.
This is great.
But the Dolan family, who, by the way, that's cable, that is cable money at its core, right? Their empire was built on cable money. So now that cable is going away fast and cord cutting has hit the Madison Square Garden network hard to the point where they're now threatening or that they're saying that they could be that sports network could go belly up here in the next 6 months, year. It's pretty nuts. And just one quick aside, if you live in the tri-state area, MSG network has been massive for 30 or 40 years. So if that regional sports network crumbles in New York City with that level of success that was built on top of a cable empire to begin with, and then the gig is up.
This is another front office sports story. This one's called Dolan's MSG network nears bankruptcy as cord cutting surges. Um, and yes, what it says is a key part of the James Dolan sports empire is teetering towards bankruptcy. It's in MSG networks. My first instantaneous thought, and so just for the record, so it says it has the rights to the Knicks, the Rangers, two developmental teams. It owns Madison Square Garden. Dolan owns Madison Square Garden, the Sphere in Las Vegas, and uh, RSNs in a series of different companies. So they're not talking about Dolan's empire in total. They're talking about just
The Knicks aren't
MSG
going bankrupt.
networks.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even the Knicks. It's
Right. But I'm saying that people see that headline, they go, are the Knicks going under?
no, they're not. Then that was what my reaction was. How is James Dolan going bankrupt? That's crazy, but he's not. It's just the regional sports network, which means even in the largest market in the United States, the regional sports network market by itself is very, very difficult to financially succeed with in today's world without some sort of ESPN style flagship contract with it. That is the lesson. It's not that Dolan's a weird guy, but he's not going bankrupt. Madison Square Garden is not going bankrupt. The Knicks are not. It's just the regional sports network part of it. But I mean, I think it shows if it can't work in New York, it can't work anywhere. It's as simple as that.
The best way, the potential bankruptcy of Madison Square Garden network is actually the firewall between Madison Square Garden Network and James Dolan's other financial properties and holdings, right? The fact that they have that bankruptcy out is the firewall between the rest of the Dolan empire, basically.
Well, that's why they
yeah.
have bankruptcies.
Yeah, okay. That's what I'm saying. So he can kill that business and protect his others. Yeah. It's still not a good thing.
Well, no, it's not a good thing, but I mean, bankruptcy is a tool. Okay. Yes. For those who don't understand it, bankruptcy is a tool to protect in business. Bankruptcy is a tool to protect assets. And so what he's doing here is putting the regional sports networks into bankruptcy to limit or eliminate some debt, which will allow him to not have to sell off other assets and put other assets in jeopardy to keep one asset afloat. That is essentially what is going on here.
One thing the article doesn't talk about, but I'm curious about, and I'm not blaming the writers. I'm just saying maybe this is kind of still an unknown or no one knows yet. But does this then allow? So let's say MSG Network files for bankruptcy, right? And then there's a whole set of conditions about what that will mean for that, right? Does that mean that then the media rights for the Knicks and the Rangers revert back to Dolan? And does he then? And so does then he then, because that's obviously a huge property. So does he go and re-license, sell, partner, whatever, with a player there, and he makes the case that then from that deal, one, he's got fiscal health for the team and the broadcast rights, and for and he probably gets the money to pay off whatever debts are left from the bankruptcy. I wonder where this does leave the Rangers, Knicks et al. Media rights.
Okay, so first of all, odds are that the Knicks and the Rangers are owned by separate entities that are controlled by Dolan, okay, and under the umbrella of some master Dolan entity, probably. And MSG Networks is just another entity that he owns. That's how business works. So in Major League Baseball and NBA, the teams own the local rights, have most of the local rights. And so in the case of this, where technically speaking, the Knicks and the Rangers have a contract with the broadcast team at MSG Networks, of which Dolan is on both sides. So if the broadcast site collapses and goes into bankruptcy, one, the trustee is going to control the contract, first of all. And the trustee could terminate it. The trustee could do a lot of things. But if that happens, then yes, the rights would revert back to the team, meaning Dolan on the other side of the ledger. So yes, so then he would hypothetically be free to form a new broadcast team network, for example. He could be free to sell it to somebody else, ESPN, pick your time if you want. I don't think he would ever do that. But he would be free to renegotiate with himself or someone else but the bankruptcy trustee would have to let it happen. And he's probably not filing. There's different kinds of bankruptcy. There's like liquidation, which I think is chapter. I'm no bankruptcy expert, but I think liquidation is chapter 13 for corporations. Then there's chapter 11, which is reorg. So it would depend on what he would file. If it's a 13, well, actually, the story says chapter 11, so that's reorg. So the odds are that um, I don't think the trustee would terminate the contract unless he both parties agreed to it, which of course both parties are Dolan. So he would agree. I don't think he would disagree with himself.
The sympathy violin is getting smaller and smaller here.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So this is it. That could happen. He could get himself out of his contract with himself to enter into a new contract with himself, hypothetically, if the bankruptcy judge didn't see through all of it, which sometimes they do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he would just prefer to, and especially since I said they're a cable empire. I mean, they're Cablevision. This is, like,
of course, he'd prefer to keep them. Of course,
right. He'd prefer these things to just be healthy, right?
So this is a way to get rid of the whatever outstanding other debts that is weighing this down. This is a way to jettison that anchor and get it back to profitability
and give himself a highly monetizable asset.
Yes,
on the other side.
Raise.
Yeah,
in the form of eliminating debt.
So, but super interesting. I think eventually that Dolan empire will crumble at some point. Then we might be talking 5-10 years. I'm not talking about next month, but I do think you could, because he's also not a bright guy. He's a Nepo baby. His dad built Cablevision. He didn't build Cablevision. So
yeah, he's not. No,
he's not the brains behind the empire. Not. So I do think this is a sizable crack, and probably, if I were making predictions that the Dolans don't own any of this in 10 years, to me, you would go back and this would be a step towards that. But if he's not an idiot and he has smart advisors, you could smartly get through it.
Well, because much like the sons and daughters of musicians, the sons and daughters of elite business people typically are dumber than their parents. And usually this sort of thing will work for a while and then not anymore. And that's sort of what's happening to Dolan. Dolan's made a lot of really weird, questionable decisions about all kinds of things, even to little things like, policies for Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, nickel and diming people.
Yeah, right. He's done a lot of strange, and he's a weird guy. And yes, so by the way, so the column says that they are $804 million in debt that is currently due on March 26th. Hence the it says that they are weeks away from needing to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So that means whatever debt they're talking about is in forbearance. So forbearance is a legal concept wherein your lenders, if you're in default to your lenders, usually for financial reasons, they can put you in forbearance, which means we're going to temporarily forestall our legal options to collect on the debt, that gives you a chance to become current. And if you come current in the time period, then all is well. But if you don't, then we're going to foreclose. And so that you always accelerate the debt, meaning bring all the debt due at once before you forbear. So what has happened here is they've accelerated $804 million of debt. They put them in forbearance. So forbearance is expiring on March 26th, which means that they can foreclose on all the assets. So he will have to file bankruptcy before that happens. And that is what's happening. I want to know where is he getting $804 million in debt for this when he owns both sides of this? Like, where is this? What is this debt?
I infer from the article and would then guess from there that, the production costs increase and just those carriage fees and those table checks are just declining at such a steep pace. So that if you were to have assumed you would have followed some kind of ramp up or at least status quo on your cable revenues into MSG, then you could balance out that cost. But if costs for production, not like wildly, but just tick up over time, and your cable business is just tanking, then I think, and they were probably chasing over the last couple of years, and then that debt just started to compact itself.
That's probably true.
There's no path out of it.
It's probably built up over time. That's probably true. Yeah.
Now, that means there's still some time. This would be one to watch. There's still time. Like, do you wonder, like, an Amazon, an ESPN,
Well,
does
could somebody
some
swoop
come
in
in
and be
this
the
intermediate
angel
time? Yeah.
investor? Yeah,
Yeah. And
possibly.
basically do what we just said, take over the local production, keep them on TV for hour long, for whatever value that is, and then move them on to their streaming offering packages.
Possibly, but this guy is also James Dolan is an egomaniac.
Right. Not many people want to do business with him.
Right. He's difficult. And so he may not want to do that. So we'll have to. I almost think Timothy Key to almost rather declare bankruptcy than let someone come in and save him.
I agree with that. If he was just generic owner, you would see those companies
Yes.
salivating over this.
But this guy, pick your, we don't want to get political here, but pick your egotistical politician, whatever side of the aisle you're on. And that is at the level this guy is at.
Well, he was already maybe in the running, but with Snyder moving out of professional sports ownership, he becomes the king of bad owners in American
Well,
sports.
There's a couple of them, but yeah,
he's certainly it's a cage match, but he's in the match.
Yeah, he's definitely the leading contender, I would say, easily.
Just Google his blues band and say,
oh, it's just so
yeah. You're welcome, or I'm sorry. Our last story, we'll talk a little bit about how the business of sports actually does interact with the on the field product. It always does to some degree, but this one's pretty overt. We've talked about this for a while. It's been obvious, but Steve will reference it in a second. There's a new article where the debate about just how potentially unfair, what the Dodgers have done with deferred contract money is. And is this creating, exasperating really an already kind of wildly unfair salary structure in Major League Baseball, which is the one where the gulf between haves and have-nots is already the biggest of the four major sports, I'd argue. But Ohtani's contract is the poster boy, but not the only one. What is it? So now we know it's $1 billion in deferred salary money.
Crazy. So, and I'm a Dodger fan, and so this hurts to say, but they are taking advantage of a loophole, and they can afford to. They are one of a handful of teams that can afford to do this. CNBC Sport had this column. It's called "With $1 billion in salary IOUs, the Dodgers spark new questions about Major League Baseball's fairness" by Russell Young, dated Saturday, March 1st. And so, so they have over $1 billion in what's called deferred contracts. Shohei Ohtani is the biggest one by far. He has the 10-year, $700 million contract. But I think we might have mentioned this before, Chris, but $680 million of that is deferred. So here's what this means. Major League Baseball does not have a salary cap, but what they have is a luxury tax level. And so if you spend above a certain amount, then you have to pay a luxury tax to Major League Baseball, which then gets distributed to other teams and stuff. And there's different levels of it. And so a normal 10-year, $700 million deal, almost nearly all Major League Baseball contracts are fully guaranteed. It's not like the NFL. So Ohtani then, under normal circumstances, if you sign him to a 10-year, $700 million deal, would count $70 million per year, probably. Depends on how it was structured, but let's go with 70 to make it simple per year, which blows the luxury tax thing way, way, way out of the water. And so by deferring it over a much, much longer period of time, that dramatically reduces the amount of annual salary that is allocated to the Dodgers payroll for luxury tax purposes. Okay. So that's why they're doing it. And Ohtani doesn't have to accept it, but what he's done is he set himself up on a retirement plan, and so now he's not the only one they've done this for. They've done this for Mookie Betts and one other whose name is escaping. I'm trying to find it in here. Freddie Freeman. So in total, between the three of those guys,
they're three biggest stars.
Yes. Well, Clayton Kershaw is probably still their biggest star, but he's not and he's at the twilight of his career at this point. So of the players who actually contributed, those three. They have a bit more than $1 billion. Now, the reason why they can do this, like the Nationals couldn't do this, because the Dodgers have such an enormous, huge, financially advantageous media rights deal. They've got like the best media rights deal in all of baseball. And Stan Katzman worked for a firm that had the name Guggenheim in it. before he became the owner of the Dodgers. They are the richest team in baseball by far. And so they can afford to have all these lingering debts out there for years and years and years after the player is gone. Most teams cannot do that. Um, and so they're basically leveraging their wealth to defer salaries, which allow them to save money by not having to pay so much luxury tax. If that makes sense, that is what's happening here. Now the problem is it's literally a loophole that nobody thought about. Um, because of the lax Major League Baseball rules, salary related rules. Not every team can do this because most teams cannot afford to have a bunch of lingering debts like this. So you have to think that they have Major League Baseball has um, tightened up some of the rules over the years, but it's still one that the Dodgers, because they have so much money, can just ignore it. So your thoughts?
I think two things can be true. I think you can. I hold no ill will toward the Dodgers for exploiting.
They're not doing anything wrong. They're
No,
taking
I mean
advantage of rules.
That's gamemanship.
Yes.
And believe that the loopholes should be quickly corrected because it is unfair and not good for the game. So I think you can hold both of those truths simultaneously, which is what I do. But the Dodgers, and Major League Baseball, and the most contentious, unique, and most relationship with their union, and then probably the most powerful union of the four sports, definitely historically, and I think still enough.
Yeah, they get the best results out of it.
So you have, that's why you have all these weird, kind of, of this kind of like salary cap. It's not a salary cap, and all this other stuff. All these like weird machinations of rules, or what
what it is a soft cap. It's not a hard cap. It's a soft cap.
So those things are more exploitable. When you have a maze of rules and regulations, then that means there are ways to find paths through there. And that's what the Dodgers have done here.
So I'm a Dodger fan, and I certainly enjoy watching I'm a lifelong fan, enjoy watching my team win. As a whole, I think it is not good for the game of baseball and for Major League Baseball if the financial dynamics are so diverse in the game. It's not like the NFL with the hard cap and a floor. You can't have the cheap teams dramatically out of whack. In Major League Baseball, like the cheap teams like the Pirates, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Florida Marlins, there's a couple others. Like the left side of the Dodgers infield has a higher salary figure than the entire team, and for some of these teams. Okay. And like Shohei Ohtani alone, is more than, if you give him 70 million a year, that's more than the payroll of some entire teams. And that is, I think, you do want to have every team have the chance to be competitive. And see, baseball, we talked before about Major League Baseball being regional, and they really need to get out of the headspace that they're a regional sport in order to really compete with basketball and football. And the best way to do that is to have far more competitive teams. And you can't do that if the salaries are so out of whack. What baseball really needs to do, but to your credit, Chris, you just pointed out, the union won't let them, is they really need a salary cap. But they can't have a salary cap because the union won't let them have a salary cap. And so this is the result of that, is you have creative, rich teams can come up with creative ways to legally get around it, get around the luxury tax.
I think there's a second part in there where you basically have the league and the players union have been remarkably successful at digging their heels in on two issues. So we just talked about it on the labor side, which is that they have been able to fight off hard caps and even effective soft caps, to be honest, for their existence. But the owners, at the same time, have dug their heels in on any kind of revenue sharing, from the NFL model to even the slightly less collectivism. There is a little bit of
revenue sharing in baseball, but it's nothing like
the least sports. Of the four. And so,
by far,
so with both sides so dug in, you end up getting these sort of like wacky arrangements because both sides won't give on that. And that, then going back to the regional sports networks and things like that, means, it means that part of that haves and have nots is those media markets, right? The majority of those assets are collectively shared in the NFL and more so in the other leagues. So you get more opportunity, so then, if you're sharing that TV media money like the NFL does, then that's what helps to drive the parity of the NFL. Because the Steelers are part of the same, media buy as the Dallas Cowboys to a large degree. And you can imagine teams like the Dodgers, we're like, no way. Why would we share our wealth with Tampa Bay, who continues to hamstring their own team and their own business operation? So you really both sides are so dug in on those core issues. And if you can't find better common ground, then there'll always be loopholes.
So the Dodgers media rights deal, in contrast to the Nationals, who own 10% of MASN, the Dodgers have an $8 billion media rights deal, a billion with a B, dramatically more than anyone else. And also, they've almost become a super team, with international impact. Thanks to Shohei Ohtani, they've had the front office sports column says the Dodgers are at the forefront of Major League Baseball's global expansion efforts, especially in Asia. Certainly because of Ohtani and the other pitcher Yamamoto, who's a little bit less known in the U.S., but still, one of their top players in a star in Japan. Their games are broadcast internationally. They're just at a completely, totally different level. And so, yes, media rights sharing, profit sharing would solve this, but the owners don't want it. And when you let this happen, you're going to have teams, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, be able to do this, whereas you have the teams on the other end, and there's not a lot you can do about it, really.
But the Yankees and the Red Sox haven't really followed this path, which
the
shows
Dodgers,
they don't have confidence in their long-term revenue.
The Dodgers are way, way, way above everyone by far. They have to understand this. The Dodgers are the richest team in baseball. The Dodgers are the Elon Musk of baseball in terms of money. Okay. The other rich teams, the Dodgers are way ahead of everybody. And so they can do things like tons of deferred contracts because they have so much money. And frankly, they could afford to do Ohtani without a deferred. It's just saving them money.
Yeah. The funny, I lost my thought. Damn it. I had a good joke.
You probably had a good one, Chris.
I know I did have a good one.
Shame.
Damn it. It went right out of my head.
I don't take blame for that one either. I didn't talk over you. You just
no. It just flew right out my ear hole. Oh, well. It'll come to me when I'm showering later today.
And you're going to be, I wish I could have
it was such a banger joke. I know what it was. But we do know the team that invented this approach, right?
What is that team?
The New York Mets. And we talked because this is really just the Bobby Bonilla strategy on steroids. Now, we're not going to go into the story again. You can Google it. We've talked about it many times. But that's exactly what this is.
The short version of the Bonilla story is Bobby Bonilla. Don't ask me numbers. I don't remember. But Bobby Bonilla signed a contract with the Pittsburgh Pirates, so it would pay him something along the lines of the Mets. Sorry, with like $1 million a year or something like that.
Yeah, that's why we celebrate Bobby Bonilla Day still every day
for 25 years. Now the Mets are doing it because they were cheap, probably more than anything else. The Dodgers are doing it because they can.
Yeah,
but it's the same. This is. Ohtani is Bobby Bonilla on a massive amount of illegal steroids.
No, the Dodgers are running their front office on the Bobby Bonilla plan for sure.
Just taken to an extreme.
Yeah, and that was in the 80s, right? I believe like 88, 89, maybe 90, somewhere in there. And that was like 3 Mets owners ago.
I don't know when the Mets get out of it finally, but I know he's still getting paid.
Yeah, he's still getting paid. Good for Bobby Bonilla.
Absolutely.
But Ohtani is on a magnitude scale much larger.
680 million of 700 million is deferred. Think about that.
What will it take? Do you think it'll take like the Dodgers winning like 3 World Series in a row or whatever? We don't have a new.
I think it'll take I think it'll take a new Major League Baseball commissioner who's not a part of the tribe. To really come in there and shake things up, because Rob Manfred is a longtime baseball guy. He doesn't have Yeah, he doesn't have the clout. It would take someone to move in and really try to manhandle some of these owners. So I think it's not on the horizon. It would only come after Manfred leaves. That's what I think.
I'm going to quickly look at when it.
So Chris is looking up something. So I'm going to vamp here for a minute because I don't really know what he's looking up.
I'm looking up when the next collective bargaining agreement is due for Major League Baseball.
Their collective bargaining agreements seem to be shorter than a lot of other sports for some reason.
Yeah, and they're already predicting lockouts. I know that, but
as happens every time, it seems like for baseball, they always threaten lockouts. Have we found it yet? Because we're
2026.
So yeah,
Major League Baseball could see a painful lockout when labor deal expires in 2026.
And we're out of time. We're going to have to go here, but I don't think that's going to change anything.
No, it's just been where these issues will arise and have to be dealt with.
Yeah.
All right. So, Steve, quickly give us hog side. You know, the Commanders never keep it boring.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a trade, we've had a cut. There's been big news in Washington land, and it doesn't have to do with hookers on a boat or anything like that in the offseason, which is a refreshing change, I'd say. And we talk about all of that on the Hogside podcast, which is released every Thursday, and we have all of our regular written content.
It's also so nice to not be on the quarterback carousel as we see that spin and spin and spin.
Oh, I know. Yeah, true.
All right. We will see you in 2 weeks.